Dr. Sharp, Mr. Wild, please report to the office. Now!
Welcome to another edition of From the Principal's Desk with Mr. Dennis Wilds and Dr. Chris Sharp. Welcome, everybody, to another edition of From the Principal's Desk. I'm Chris Sharp.
I'm Dennis Wilds.
And we are happy you are back with us. Hopefully, you've subscribed to our channel. Hopefully that you're reading our blogs. But it's been a little bit of a hiatus. If you haven't paid attention, there's something going on in the world. Dennis, how are you living?
Oh, man, we're good. We can't complain. We're blessed here. We've got everything we need to stay in and stay healthy and safe.
Well, that's the same here. Thankfully, knock on wood, all my family's healthy right now. All the kids, from my knowledge, at my school are healthy at this point. I pray that they're going to stay that way. You and I both have been hard. We've been hard at work, sending out grade cards. We've been sending out work. You've been working, buddy.
Yeah, I worked yesterday and today. I know you worked yesterday, as all principals did in our district. We went in and stuffed envelopes and put address labels on 300 plus envelopes to send grade cards home to students. Had several parents reach out to me, ask for work packets because they don't have internet access to access the online resources we provided for them. So I stuffed some bigger envelopes full of work packets and put those in the mail crate and delivered them to central office to get those out in the mail to our families.
Hey, that is a great thing to do. I did the same thing yesterday. I was fortunate I had a little bit of help. I know you were doing it by yourself, brother. You the man. That's all I got to say. You are the man.
Listen, they would have gladly come out and helped me had I asked. I mean, if I'd have put a feeler out there and said I need 3 or 4 guys or, teachers to come out and help me out, those ladies and gentlemen out there, they would have come out in a heartbeat and helped me. But just with everything going on right now, I just felt like, hey, I got this. I can handle it. And but today, my lovely wife, went up and helped me stuff envelopes and put labels on it, and we got it done in a couple hours and grabbed some groceries on the way home, and hopefully we're in for a couple days.
Hey, she's not in the background somewhere where you're saying all this nice stuff, is she?
No, actually, she's not even here. She delivered food. She delivered food to some family that live near us, her grandmother, and she's not even here right now. So I said that on my own.
Hey, you are a good man. Well, what we're talking about leads us right into what we were going to discuss today. And we've been talking about culture. Last time we talked about taking those temperature checks, kind of finding out where you're at. So Dennis, give us a quick recap for the people. Maybe this is their first time listening. I hope it's not, but if so, give us a little recap.
Sure. If you missed show 1, our first podcast ever From the Principal's Desk, go back and check it out. I'm sure Chris will drop the link down below somewhere. But go back and give it a listen. In our first episode, it's about 30 minutes, and we just kind of introduced ourselves, and then we started getting into culture, and we really just broke down what culture was and the importance of culture. That's the first thing we did. And basically what we said was culture is the beliefs that drive the behaviors that create the experiences in your school. So it's 3 components to school culture: beliefs, behaviors, experiences. And then we went into assessing the culture. And, and when you're a new administrator and you're going into a new building and you're trying to figure out, okay, what is the culture of my school? Is it good? Is it bad? Do I need to focus on this? Which we decided we should always focus on school culture. That should always be a priority.
Absolutely.
And even if you're not a new school principal, how can you gauge where your school culture is? And, I do something I like to call temperature checks. When a student's sick, they come to the office, we take their temperature. So I like to do a temperature check with my school building. And that's simply talking to people, talking to, lower grades teachers, elementary teachers, middle school teachers, specialty area teachers, special ed teachers, parents, students, talking to all those different stakeholders about your school. Because if you want to know what's going right and what's going wrong with your school, they will tell you. They're not shy.
You are absolutely right. Hey, if you need honesty, go talk to a kindergartner, a first grader. They will tell you straight up what's going wrong and what's going right in your school.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And then you just take the results, the feedback that you collect from that temperature check, and you prioritize it. What I did was, okay, what were some commonalities that all these different people were telling me. And if it was a commonality, if it's something I heard over and over again, I knew that was something I needed to focus on, so that automatically became a priority for me. When I
Sure.
first went to Camp Creek, I ended up with 10 priorities, um, or 10 commonalities, and that became my priorities, and that's what I focused on. And that's basically um, what I focused the development of my plan around, were those 10 commonalities.
So you've been at Creek for 3 years, and you had cultural problems. We all, I know about it. We don't need to delve into it, but you have made leaps and bounds over the years, working on your school culture. And I know that's been hard, and it's a continuing process. So walk me through just a little bit more. You've taken that temperature check. Let's review, because we're going to talk a lot about culture today.
Sure. Basically, I developed a plan. And the plan, my main thing with that plan was to keep it simple. The more simple the plan is, the more people will easily buy into it. And you state that why, you get them to buy in. You tackle one or two priorities at a time. We didn't tackle 10 priorities at one time. There's just, that would be overwhelming for anyone. So there are times we've got two or three focus areas at one time, but a lot of times it's just one or two. This is something you appreciate. It's not a sprint. It's a marathon. We're going on 3 years, and we're still working on a lot of this stuff. We're not where we want to be yet, but we're a lot better off than we were. We're a lot closer.
Right.
We collaborate a lot more. We've got a lot more involvement from our faculty, our staff, our students, our parents, the community. We're still evolving, but we're moving in the right direction.
Well, and I love the fact that you say not a sprint, it's a marathon. That's something in my blog I've really pushed. Even this past week, I was talking about the continuous struggle. It's all about moving forward, constant motion. You don't have to be fast. You just have to be moving in the right direction. And change is the same way, whether it's cultural change, curriculum change, assessment change. You have to take it slow. You have to do the work, and you have to continue to move forward. I think a lot of times in education, we try to rush everything. We want it done like that. We'll blink an eye and everybody's going to be on board, and we're going to have something brand new going on. And it doesn't work. I mean, that's fantasy land. That's Shangri-La.
Yeah, it doesn't work that way. A lot of the my plan for my school, it required a lot of change. And change is just not natural to most people. Me personally, I don't mind it too much. I've never really minded change. I guess I get bored with the same old, so I'm always looking to change things up a little bit on my own anyway. So, I'm not really that natural resistant to change, but a lot of people are, and you have to keep things simple and really get them to buy in and explain to them why you're doing what you're doing. And, just take it slow. With those people, if you really want them to be on board.
I couldn't agree more. I'm one of those. Blame it on my ADHD, whatever. I can't stay in one place too long without doing something different.
Right.
In all honesty, the position I'm in is the longest I've stayed in one particular spot in my career. I've always changed grade levels. I've always changed subject areas, and I've gotten to where this position it's always challenging, because I'm having to adapt. I'm having to self-improve. And I think that's the beauty of it. And that leads us kind of into what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about, understanding, now that you've taken that temperature check, where are we going from there? How do we move forward? And, I'm going to use the term change. I know that's a buzzword, but change is one of those things. It can apply to discipline. It can apply to assessment, curriculum. We just named them. It could apply to anything. So, let's start off with the why.
Yeah.
Dennis, give me your thoughts on how do you establish that with your school?
Well, first off, I think you need to talk about the importance of the why. Without the why, if people don't understand why you're asking them to change, why are you focusing on this? Why are you asking us to do this or to make this shift? If they don't understand the why, you're really fighting an uphill battle from the start. I know in one of your blogs, you focused a lot on the why.
Absolutely.
you started off with starting off with the why. So I guess before we get into how we establish that why don't you tell us a little bit about the importance of the why?
Well, I'm a big believer in understanding why you're out there. What is the purpose in your work? Because a person without purpose, they're just drifting. And I think when you're talking about school culture, you're talking about a centralized focus, whether it's your mission or your vision statement or it's in your syllabus, that you are stating what your why is. My blog is focused around endurance sports, running, triathlon, biking, a lot of poop jokes. I'm sorry, it's what it is, but sorry, life happens. I wrote a book about it, but starting off with why are you out there? For me, I learned that it was a journey to self-improvement. That's why I got into endurance sports. It didn't matter that I was the fastest. It didn't matter that I was going to win races. I don't win many races, obviously, but I wanted to be out there and compete with other people who shared the same ideas that I did. You'll see a guy out there who's 250, 300 pounds riding a bicycle. He has no business out there according to what he looks like. But his why is he wants to get better. Well, as a school, that applies. Why, as a school, should we say, I'm stuck here. I want to stay here. Our kids deserve better than that. They deserve us to change with the times. One of the blog.
And I always call that, you're good. I always call that's when you hit autopilot. If you ever get, and we'll get into that when we get into expectations and we talk about above the line, below the line, but that's what I call autopilot. As a school or as a person, as a principal, as a teacher, as a school and organization as a whole, if you ever get to a point where you're satisfied with the status quo, I'm just satisfied with the way things are. Why are we changing? Right. Why? Because education changes.
Absolutely.
Every day. Your clientele changes from year to year. Initiatives change, focuses change, and we have to change and adjust with those. So we can't stay on autopilot.
I don't think I've told you this little saying. Years ago, I took jiu-jitsu, and the guy I took from, Grandmaster Charles Allen, he used to tell me, he'd say, at one point in time, the musket was the baddest weapon in the land. Until somebody made the repeating rifle.
Right.
And then they made the machine gun. And I know that's not a good analogy for schools, but if you think about it, what was old school, it was good for the old school, but the old school's burned down. It's gone.
Yeah. Sure.
I grew up with typewriters, and a Walkman, that's what we had.
Yeah, I had those.
Yeah, there you go. And we're in, I just had to stop my kids from streaming so we could do this. So, it's a different world. And to assume that we can be quote unquote old school and not move forward, it's naive. It's a backwards way of thinking.
Yeah. And that's a challenge we face.
Yeah.
That's a challenge we face a lot of times with teachers. Just try to get them off of autopilot, to be more open-minded, not be as resistant, and accept and embrace that change. But to do that, it's very important, and it's only fair to them is to state that why, to make sure they understand the why.
Well, and going back to the core values for your school, hopefully everybody in your school is there for kids. They're there for their students, and they want the best for them. If you can go back to that root cause, that reason behind education, you should be able to guide them in the same way, in the way that you want them to go. And I'm big on, when we're establishing why, there's another little saying that I picked up in those years doing jiu-jitsu was, it's an old samurai saying of, choose the battles you fight wisely so you have the energy to fight the ones that matter. A lot of times in education, we spend so much time. I need to do this. I need to address my ELA. I need to address my math. I need to address, discipline problems, my chronic absenteeism. My IEPs are all wacky. Sometimes you've got to focus on the most important thing that everyone can agree on is the most important thing for your school to move forward, and not let your mind get cluttered with the 1,000 other things that need to be addressed. Simple, as you said, KISS method, simplify, focus. I use in my blog, focus on that first mile,
Yeah.
getting through that
Yeah.
first mile. And, it's hard. It stinks. It's sweaty. It's nasty. But once you get through that first mile, the next mile becomes a little bit easier and the next mile easier. And that's how change happens. That's how, that's how winning happens.
Yeah.
So-
Like we said, prioritize, simplify, and then when you go to implement the plan, start with the why. Make sure everybody understands why you're doing this. Make sure your why, like you've stated, like you've wrote about in your blogs, make sure your why aligns with your school mission and vision. And I guess I'll kind of take a second to talk about vision. That just reminds me, it's real simple. I mean, you go to a lot of websites and everybody has this big long mission, and we've actually got one of those formal mission statements as well. And there's nothing wrong with that. But my vision as an administrator is I don't want to be like other schools. I want other schools to want to be like my school. I want them to see what we're doing, the changes we're going through, and I want them to want to be like us. I don't want to be like, the best school. It's like, you think about college football teams. A lot of people, they want to be like Alabama. Alabama's been on top for years. And I understand why people want to be that way. As a leader, I don't want to be like another program. I want to build my program or my organization, a school, in our case, up to a level where other people want to be like us.
Absolutely.
And that starts with your school culture. You're never going to get there if your school culture doesn't support that and everybody doesn't buy in and understand the why.
I can't agree with you anymore. I'll tell you, and I'll start off with, first of all, I love you like a brother. You're hilarious. We have a lot of great conversations. But when it comes to schools, I want my school to be just that much better than your school. And that's not personal. And I know you're the same way.
There's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with competition. Healthy, friendly competition.
And for those listening, I would give Dennis the shirt off my back if he asked for it, and he'd do the same for me. We share so many ideas. Talking about our mission and vision, I had a PD a couple of weeks ago. We had a PD day in our district, and I sat down and I asked my staff, I said, can anyone tell me what the mission and vision of this school is? And you could have heard crickets.
Mm-hmm.
And that bothers me. So we started off with, okay, what is our mission? What is our vision? And they wanted to start with the vision statement. And they chose a line I use every day that I stole from an old administrator friend of mine. They said, instead of making a new one, let's use what you've already got. Do your best, stay above the line, and be a leader. Mm-hmm. Now, I mean, stay above the line. You write about that in your blog.
Sure.
Yeah. So I was honored that they chose that, but none of that really had to do with curriculum. None of it necessarily had to do with instruction. It was about being a good person. And
Sure.
I thought that was powerful.
Yeah, but here's the thing. We've adopted that concept at Camp Creek Elementary School 2 years ago. That concept, I didn't learn that concept from an educational book. Yeah. I learned that concept. Above the Line was a book, written by Urban Meyer, where he implemented that concept when he took the job at Ohio State. And I know there's a lot of controversy surrounding Urban Meyer. I'm not a huge Ohio State fan or anything like that, but I do like to study, successful leaders. And in reading that book, I was able to take a lot of the strategies that he implemented for Above the Line and implement that into school culture and leading a school. And we'll get more into that in a future podcast. But, education, business, other areas, careers, it's easy to relate that stuff.
Sure.
For me, for me. So, that concept, Above the Line has not always been an educational concept,
Sure.
But I adapted it to fit my school.
Well, and a lot of the stuff I read has absolutely zero to do with educational leadership. They're just leadership books.
Exactly.
Or they're books about triathlon or running, or you can pull from anywhere. I mean, I quoted an old samurai saying just a minute ago, but it's as relevant to our discussion as it was when it was first told.
Sure.
So moving forward, let's talk about we're moving into change. We're moving whatever your change is. I think personally, I think one of the best things you could do when you're implementing change is the power of positivity. That is something that is often overlooked, especially when you have situational leaders who do it because I'm the boss. You're cashing my check. Do it because I said so. That's only going to get you about that far before everybody, starts doing exactly what they're the bare minimum. So let's talk about power of positivity. Dennis, give me something.
That's a big thing, for us, at my school. We started one of the first priorities that we focused on from that temperature check was our attitude and our dispositions, starting with me, when I'm at school. When I did that initial check, I learned that we had pockets of negativity. We had cliques that needed to be addressed. I chose to address this by pushing a super positive message. To do that, I pretty much had to start, sweating and bleeding positivity. Todd Whitaker, states in one of his books, when the principal sneezes, the entire school catches a cold. Cold. I'm sorry. When the principal sneezes, the entire school catches a cold. Which means, if I go down the hall, I'll doom and gloom, then everybody else is going to be doom and gloom. But if I go down the hall positive, or if I react to a negative situation in a positive manner, then people that see that, hopefully they will react the same way.
Well, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
I kind of had an eye-opening experience last year, talking about walking down the hallway with the doom and gloom written on your face. One of my teachers, great lady, respect the heck out of her. I love this teacher. She looks at me and she goes, we have a code word for you. And every school's had some kind of code word like that. If code brown, code V, there's one for the fire marshal, there's one for the health inspector. Hey, don't catch me. I'm just saying we have them.
Oh yeah, but every school does.
Mine was the code for me was BMS. And they said when I had a furrowed brow, it was BMS, meaning bad mood sharp. So avoid sharp at that time. Well, yeah, I chuckled, I laughed. I thought that's funny. But it also, I had to look inward and say, you know what? That's telling me that I'm projecting my feelings, and my staff and my students are noticing that. So I've got to stop. Yeah. No matter how much, I want to be that, the bad mood guy, or that I'm exhibiting that. It's time to put on the mask, act like you're, act happy, and to go back to one of our blogs about positivity, the old Cherokee story about the two dogs, about the young boy goes to his grandfather and says, "Grandfather, I feel like there are two dogs within me. One is filled with anger and hate and jealousy and rage, and the other is filled with joy and hope and happiness and love." And his grandfather said, "Yes, that's very common." And he said, "But grandfather, how do I know when they fight which one will win?" He made it very simple. He said, "Grandson, it's the one you feed."
Yeah.
And I've been guilty. I fed that bad dog. I fed that negative dog. We all have at some point. And at some point you have to say, okay, I'm going to hunt that dog. Now he's going to be mine, and I'm going to feed that positive dog. I want to be the light in my school when all else fails and the chips are down and everyone's feeling doom and gloom. I mean, right now is a perfect example. Sure. I mean, you and I both, everybody around the country is going through something we've never experienced. If I got online and said, "Oh, it's the end of the world, what are we going to do?" and had masks on and acted a fool, my kids would act that way. My teachers would act that way. So when I'm addressing change, even if I don't like it, even if I don't agree with the new curriculum or the new area that we're going into, and from the county's perspective, I'm going to sell it like I love it. Yeah. Because if I don't love it, they won't love it.
Yeah. And talking about your story, the first time I heard you, I read your blog when you blogged about, the two dogs. It reminded me, it comes straight from, John Gordon's, The Positive Dog. You got a positive dog and a negative dog. You got to feed the positive dog. And that's the same as, feeding the good dog. Talk about some things there, Chris, that you do to feed the positive dog or the good dog.
Well, I think one of the biggest things that people overlook, it's written self-help books. I've read them,
Mhm.
especially when it applies to leadership. One of the first things they talk about is positive self-talk.
Mhm.
You can talk yourself into a frenzy without saying a word. That mental chatter that you get going on when you start to doubt yourself, when you start questioning, did I do the right thing? It's okay to reflect. Don't get me wrong, but you have to control that because as negativity, it snowballs and it will consume you. So I've learned that at some point, I have to balance any negative talk with positive talk. Hey, I'm
Mhm.
okay. Hey, we're doing a good job. That child over there, he didn't get an office referral today. All right, way to
Yeah.
go. That's one day. Let's try for two. You
Yeah.
know, those are things that I've had to focus on. And it's not easy. It is so easy to focus on that one bad kid in your class and forget about the 24 others that are doing exactly what you want them to do. The negativity will feed. The other thing is, you got to take time. I'm very big on, I separate my work from my family as much as possible. We're in administration. You
Mhm.
don't get that opportunity a whole lot. The cell phone rings constantly, the text messages, the emails, they come in. But I don't take paperwork home. And it's not because, I'm trying to be lazy or shortchange my employer. It's I will give until 5:30. I'll
Yeah.
give until 6:30.
Yeah. I
But
agree.
when I leave, I'm leaving this
Yeah.
behind because I have to
Mhm.
heal.
Sure, I do the same thing. I don't bring a lot home. I mean, I get my laptop out at home sometimes, and I'll,
Hmm.
while TV's on, and I'll, browse and look through some stuff. But as far as paperwork, documentation, things like that, I don't bring that stuff home. I get to work early, I leave late. I work hard while I'm there.
Right.
And it's only fair that when I come home, that most of my time's devoted to my family.
Sure. And I'll tell you, I learned that lesson about 10 years ago. My I was working on my dissertation for my doctorate, and my son, he was probably about 4 years old at the time, maybe 3 years old.
Yeah.
He came he came into my room and he looked at me and he said, "Dad, I'm going to play daddy right now." And he sat at my computer and started pretending to type.
Yeah.
That was a wake up call. That was
Sure.
that was like, listen, I know I've got a lot to do. I'm working full time. I'm going back to school, but he can't see that. I have to
Mhm.
separate that for my well being and his well being. You know, and to deal with that a little bit further, taking time for yourself, not just your family. That's how I got into endurance sports. It wasn't because I love running. I was a wrestler. We ran for punishment. That was, but I took up running because my kids couldn't catch me. I mean, I could I could go run 3 miles, and I got 30 minutes by myself within my
Sure.
own head.
Yeah.
I started biking because I got an hour, maybe two, with just with my thoughts, quiet time.
Hmm.
I couldn't work, I couldn't talk to my wife or my kids. It was time for myself, and that's healing time, and that's how you feed that positivity. Uh, the last thing I tell people, or well, two things I want to tell people. One is don't be afraid. And this sounds, I just said, I grew up a wrestler, I'm a triathlete, but
I know
sometimes
where you're going. I know where you're going with this.
man, you and I, because we both been there.
Been there.
Sometimes you got to cry. It's
Yeah.
okay to cry for your kids. It's okay to cry for your family. I've been in a situation the last 2 weeks that brought me to tears, uncontrollable tears, as have you.
Yes, sir.
And I'm glad to say I've got a friend who listened to me when I needed him, and I hope that I can help him when he needs me.
Yes, sir.
But sometimes you got to let it out because that negative emotion just feeds that negative dog, that bad dog, and it's going to consume you.
Well, you talk about a lot here, and any administrator will understand this. I may not have until I stepped into administrator's shoes, but we really try. It's super important for us to feed the positive dog because administrators have to set the tone for the faculty and staff. We discussed that earlier,
Sure.
but you can only do that so much because things really are going on in our lives, believe it or not, whether we show it or not.
I,
And you can only put that mask on, which is our job. That's what we do. I make that a priority to do that. But sometimes you got to have somebody to talk to. You got to have somebody to let that out because you can't just carry it all the time. For me, I'm lucky. I have my wife I can talk to. I've got you that I can talk to. Other administrators. So, you got to have somebody to talk to, and that's who you need to let that stuff out to. You don't have to go down the hallway letting it out to every teacher you pass by.
No.
Because they don't need to hear that.
No.
They've got their own priorities and troubles as well, and they've got each other that they can talk to. But everybody does need somebody that they can vent to and get that stuff out because it's important to talk about it.
Sure. Hey, it's like the Blues Brothers said, everybody needs somebody sometime.
Yeah. Going back to one of your highlights up here, your points was, leave the office at the office. We talked about not bringing that stuff home. That reminded me several years ago when I first became an administrator of a story that somebody shared with me. And, most administrators or leaders have heard this, the Trouble Tree story, where a gentleman come home one day, the little boy was standing at the door and the dad carried a small tree out of the back of the truck, and he dug a hole and he planted it in the yard right by the driveway. Right beside the driveway. And every day that little boy would run to the door to see his daddy come home, and his dad would get out of the car and he'd go over and he would touch a branch on that tree. And the little boy just kind of watched. And he's like, okay, what's daddy doing? He's just checking on the tree. Well, he did that every day for years. And the little boy finally got old enough to get curious to wonder, why does my dad walk over to that tree every day and touch that tree when he gets out of the car before he comes in? So he asked him. He said, Dad, every day when you get home, you get out of your car and you walk over and you touch a branch on that tree right beside the driveway. Why do you do that? And he said, well, son, that's my trouble tree. Every day when I get off of work and I come home and I get out of the car, I walk over and I'm hanging my troubles on that tree branch so I don't carry them in the house to you. And that's something that's always stuck with me. I'm not always the best with that. To be honest, I'll be totally transparent. I'm really not always the best with that. But that's a story that I'll never forget. I always carry that with me, and I try to share it with young administrators.
I'm as guilty. You walk in the house, you've had a DCS referral, you've had the sheriff's department there, and it weighs on you, and you try not to let it affect your family, your kids, yourself. It's hard.
Sure.
I found, I'll be honest, our blogging has helped me tremendously. It's a form of journaling.
Sure. It's an outlet.
It is. And just you and I having a conversation, I think we've probably talked more in the last 3 months than we have, in
4 years.
Yeah. And, we talk almost every other day just to check in, say, hey, how's it going? And that's not that we're having a long conversation, but just to, hey, let me tell you what I've got. You tell me what you got, and we can handle each other's stuff. Finding that person, and be your own cheerleader too. That's the last thing I'm going to leave this with, this section. Guys, I joke with my staff. I'm a big wrestling fan from way back. And I look in the mirror. I joke with my staff that I look in the mirror every day and I woo like Nature Boy,
Like
Ric Flair. Yes, sir. Because I'm the man. That's what, and it's not because I'm trying to be, overly confident or, narcissistic. It's because it's a confidence boost. Like, you know what, when I step into that classroom or I step into that hallway, I'm going to be the man for these kids. You got to beat me. You're going to have to work harder to be more excited, more passionate than I am. And that's kind of how, I've started attacking my days is, give yourself a woo in the morning. Woo!
I've got a 45-minute drive to work, so I don't always go to Ric Flair, but I do have the positive, upbeat music pumping on my way to work a lot of mornings. Trying to get myself a little Eye of the Tiger or something going.
You got Dave Allen Cole. Don't lie.
Hey, the best days are Fridays. They got that throwback on 94.9. You get some of those old high school and college tunes. They get you fired up a little bit before you go to work.
Yeah, and some of them you're happy your kids aren't in the car for, right? Hey, it's 2020. I'm still down with OPP.
Yeah.
So let's move forward. We talked about being the good cheerleader. We've talked about the why. How do you get things moving forward? Because as we started off with, it's all about forward progress. I'm going to talk a little bit about the influencers, and I know. When taking your school temperature, you and I had very different initial years at our school. I withdrew from my people. Not because I wanted to, but because, in all honesty, at that point I was in survival mode. Talk to me about how you use your influencers to implement your school change.
Well, like I said, I learned a lot when I did that temperature check. I learned a lot about who was going to be honest with me, who would tell me the truth and not just what I wanted to hear. And most of them did. Most of them told me, what I needed to hear. So I was able to identify some, some good, honest, committed, teachers within my school. And I initially formed a PAC, a Principals Advisory Committee, or a leadership team, with that group. And I started meeting with that group, probably not as often as I should, but I did start, and I still do meet with them. Try to about once a month, just to bounce ideas, listen to concerns, challenge them. Hey, learn more about this. I would like to start doing this. Start talking to people in your hallways about this. Give me some feedback. That's kind of how I use the influencers in my building.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I learned about this through missing a class. Is where my passion for influencers came from. I'd missed one of my classes at each, and my professor assigned a book called Crucial Conversations.
Great book.
Great book. Now, there's a whole series. The last in the series is The Influencer, and it talks about the power to change anything. And it's not so much about the leader's ability, but the leader's ability to find those within his group that are going to influence the change. They don't have to be the head, the head of a department. They don't have to be the person who's writing the checks. They're the ones who people look to because they have wisdom, they have trust.
They're respected.
Absolutely. And
among their peers.
Sure. And as well as I do, teachers, if you don't have the respect of your teachers, you don't have anything.
Well, and as a new administrator, when you first come into a building, you don't have that right off.
Sure.
I mean, you might have that initial respect because, hey, you're my boss, so I respect you, but you don't have that trust. Those respected influencers that you're talking about have been there, have worked with these people within that building. So those are the ones you need to go to first and state your why and get them on your side. Get them bought in and let them carry your message out into your building.
Well, you're like me. When I started, I was 34 years old when I first took my first principalship. I'm walking into a room with, 50, 60-year-old people who have been doing this 25, 30 years. There's no reason why they should listen to me. In all honesty, if a principal had walked in with 5 years experience, I wouldn't want to listen to them. So you have to gain that trust of those influencers. One of the great stories in that book talks about how, influencers hold people accountable for their expectations. We're going through a time right now with the pandemic. We're holding each other accountable for a 6-foot distance. My neighbor looked at me and said, "Hey, 6 feet." I wasn't offended. He was holding me accountable.
Sure.
I think that's what your influencers do. They talk about the guinea worm outbreak in Africa and how this disease kept affecting this tribe. And it's a really nasty disease. Look it up on Google if you don't have anything else to do.
Well, I've got all kinds of time right now.
Yeah, I mean, guinea worm. I actually used this in a PD for my staff. They had never heard of it. And I showed them pictures. It's a worm that is waterborne. And what would happen in Africa, people go to the water source because it's a community water source, and they would get the water, put their feet in the water to get the water. They would contract guinea worm. Okay. So part of guinea worm is when it's ready to breed, it starts itching and burning. So where do they go? Back to the water source.
Right.
So when they would go back into the water, it would spread more guinea worm eggs. So it was, the researchers kept on watching, and they're like, how do we fight this? Well, number one, water filtration, simple fix. They used a simple cloth to filter their water. And number two was using the influencers within the tribe to keep people out of it. If you have guinea worm, stay away from the water. It's not about you. It's about us. Schools are the same way. Think about a curriculum. You know, you don't like the curriculum. That's fine. Don't like the curriculum. But you know what? It's not about you. It's about us. It's about the kids, the community.
Exactly right.
You know, hold each other accountable. Use those influencers. That's how change continues to work forward.
I agree.
Yeah. So let's talk about the last little bit here. We've kind of we're on 45 minutes right now.
I feel like we were going for a while.
Well, and maybe this is a two-parter. I don't know, but I do want to talk about the last thing that for me, when you're talking about change, pushing change in your schools is. And I wrote, you know, I have a blog. I think it was my third blog I wrote about pace and the importance of taking your time and not pushing yourself to where you. I call it hitting the wall. Everybody can assume what that means. In racing, when you hit the wall, your body breaks down. In all honesty, you lose control of your body, you lose control of your bowels, and you'll pass out. It happens. It's happened to me within the last 3 weeks. I've been doing this for almost 10 years, and it still happens because I forget to pace myself. Change is no different. Change a lot of times, like we talked about earlier, you want to do it right now. I said, let's do it. We're doing it. We're all in. Let's go. And that curriculum, that change should be done tomorrow. And you wonder why it fails. Well, people, it takes time. It takes support. It takes professional development. You know, I outlined in my paper about, 3 big things you need to know. And I use racing as a example. Number one, you got to know the course. Where do you want to go? What's the end destination? If you don't know that, you're wasting your time. Just having grand ideas is great, but if you don't know what that grand idea leads to, you're wasting everyone's time, and you're ultimately you're costing yourself equity within your staff. They're not going to believe you if it fails. The more you fail, the more they're going to see the next change as a failure.
So you're saying, let's get this straight. Look, you're saying to know where you go, that's kind of where that temperature check comes in.
Sure.
Take your temperature check, figure out your priorities, and figure out where you need to go. What
Absolutely.
you need to do. Okay.
Absolutely.
Good deal.
Yes. And it's just if you have an idea of where you want to go, and the question I always get asked by some of my mentors is, what does that look like? When I get there, how will I know I'm there?
Yeah.
In racing, we call it the finish line. In schools, the finish line's always changing. So, you have to clearly define when this is right. How do I know it's right?
So relating that, how far you're going to go, relating that to school culture and our school culture talk, knowing the course, is, knowing where you want to go, knowing the distance is understanding that this is not a sprint, it's a marathon.
Bingo.
This is going to take time.
Absolutely.
Changing the culture in your school takes time.
Well, I can tell you, there's a big difference between running a 5K and running a marathon.
Sure.
I mean, all the difference in the world. And you plan for it differently. Well, if I'm changing car pickup line, okay, I can get that done in a couple, 2-3 weeks. Couple bad days, we're going to have it down, no problem. If I'm changing the entire school schedule and I'm going to implement a new RTI schedule with new teachers, that's going to take a lot longer.
Oh yeah.
It's going to be more difficult. So understanding that going in, how to pace yourself. Okay, this is a 3-week change. We can do this in 3 weeks. Realistically, that's the big thing, knowing realistically. I could tell people all day, hey, I'm going to run a 3-hour marathon. You can look at my results. They're online. I ain't ever come close to a 3-hour marathon, and me telling you or telling anybody else that that's going to happen is a lie.
Yeah.
So
be realistic.
Be realistic. What's your distance, and what's it going to take?
Sure.
And that leads to the last one. Know where your fitness level is. And for school culture, think about this. How much equity do you have with your teachers? Mm-hmm. How much, and I hate to be this way, how much do they trust you? Do they believe in you? Are they going to follow a initiative that's going to cause them pain or discomfort? Mm-hmm. When you take people out of their comfort zone, they get wonky. So you have to be real careful about that. If your culture isn't strong and you're going to tackle a huge change, chances are you're going to fail. It's just the way it is. Mm-hmm. Years ago, I ran an Ironman and I didn't train for it. Ironman's 140 miles. And I
Wow.
had 2 months before it, I stopped training. My fitness level was zero, zero. And my intelligence level was about zero too, because I wound up sitting on a bench at mile 18 of the marathon. I was 8 miles from the finish. What is that? 136 miles I'd done,
Mm-hmm.
8 miles from the finish, and I'm sitting at because I didn't take into account where my fitness level was. Well,
Right.
if I'm implementing change in my school, and I know, listen, teacher A, B, C, and D are going to cause me problems, and
Mm-hmm.
I know they're going to be a problem, and I don't address that, and I don't get ready for that, and I don't plan for that, you're going to fail. It's just the way it is. You just can't tell people, and it's going to happen. That's not how change works. And
Sure.
unfortunately, a lot of people, shockingly, a lot of people still believe if I say it, they do it just because I'm the boss. Well, you know what? You can keep thinking that, but normally those guys are the ones
Maybe to
that
your face.
exactly, exactly.
Now let's recap this here. Planning your race. Let's say you're planning your race to change culture in your school.
Sure,
So knowing the course is just learning your priorities and where you want to go, where you want to get your culture to that point. Knowing the distance is knowing that it's going to take time to get there. It is not a sprint, it's a marathon. It's not something you can do overnight or in a week for that matter.
sure,
And then knowing your fitness uh, in planning your race to change culture is knowing your strengths and the tools within your school, and also taking care of yourself through this
absolutely,
process
absolutely.
because it
Because
is a long process. So
well, school
take care.
culture does
Go
school
ahead.
co- well, I'm sorry. School culture doesn't happen overnight. I
Right.
mean, if it did, everybody would be doing that. Go to a bookstore, there are, 100 books lined up on school culture and how to build it. It's a process. And that's
Yeah.
the most important thing to understand is if you don't plan for that process in some way,
Hmm.
and that process will probably change, be ready to change. But if you don't plan, it's not going to be successful. It takes time, it takes planning, and it takes knowing your resources and knowing where you're at as a leader.
Yeah, I love that, and that's real simple. That's a real simple term. Knowing your resources within your school, and your resources are those influencers that we talked about
Mhm.
earlier. Those people that have the trust of their peers. Developing a good plan and taking care of yourself through the process. Because, folks, I'm on year 3 of changing culture at my school. Has it been super difficult? No, I'm not going to sit here and say it's been a very difficult a change because I have a great staff that have really bought into the why and they did a really good job of supporting my crazy ideas. Um, but it is a marathon. I mean, we're in year 3 of this and we're still going and we'll still be dealing with this moving into year 4 next year.
Sure.
You know, our school culture is always going to be a priority for my school.
Well, and it should be because your clientele changes constantly. I mean,
Exactly.
I, if you ever like started off with the old school, everyone I hate when teachers say I'm old school. Well, burn the old school down. I don't care because the kids coming in are not old school. So if you're thinking that way, you're behind the 8 ball. Your culture has to change with the times. You know.
Exactly. And you're getting ready to go through the same changes I'm going through,
Hmm.
Chris.
Yeah.
I've been a K-8 school since 1965.
Yeah.
Starting next year, I'm going to be a K-5 school. I'm not going to have those middle school kids in my school. So the oldest kids, yeah,
Hallelujah! Hallelujah!
and
I'm sorry.
I'm the opposite because I was a middle school teacher. I'm going to miss those guys.
So was
But
I. So was I.
the oldest kids in our school, the most mature kids in our school now, the leaders of our student leaders of our school are now going to be 5th graders and not 8th graders. That
Sure.
changes things. That changes programs. That changes, the way we do things. It changes the way we're going to interact with those kids. So, that's going to change the culture of our school, and we have to adapt. We can't keep doing this, the way we've done things even the last 2 or 3 years. We're going to have to make more changes.
Well, you're in a rural school. I'm in a rural school. we both know the most dangerous thing that you can hear, and it is so predominant, so prevalent in rural school, is that's the way we've always done it.
Oh yeah.
Oh man, that's a kiss of death. If that's your thinking, you're wrong. I hate to say that, but you are so dead wrong. I told mine when we had our PD day, talking about our school changes, and you and I have talked about this in private. I told mine straight up, here's where we're going. Here's the changes we're making. Here's room assignments. Here's everything we're doing right now. Be mad at me now, because come May, we're done. We're going to be over it, because the way things have been done is over. We are going to make it the way we want it. Not me, not Chris Sharp, the way we as my school, our school, want it. And we're going to agree upon that. And I think that's exactly what we're talking about through this whole process.
Yeah, and that's the way we spent our day as well. The new staff was there, and I said, listen, this is not Dennis Wild School. This school's going to stand long after I'm gone. Something happens to me next week, I want everything to keep going smoothly. I want things to keep going the Camp Creek way, not my way. I want whatever we do, whatever we come up with, our culture, our programs, whatever we put in place, I want involvement from everybody. I want everybody bought in, and I want it to be about the school and not what I want.
Right.
That's the last thing I want.
Well, and that's tough. And that is you were so wise for telling them that, because so many leaders, it's my way or the highway. We've talked about that ad nauseum to a point, but it is out there. You and I both know guys like that would say, it's my way. It's not my way. It's our way.
Well, instead of saying it's my way or the highway, the conversation should be, here's what I would like to do. Here's what I'm thinking, and here's why.
Exactly. Yes. Getting back to the why, man. That's why you're the man. Hey, we've been going long, so I'm going to kind of wrap this up. Before we leave, I do want to give the listeners at home a little homework assignment, something that I think is worthy of their time. One of the books that I've read recently, it's been a few months since I finished it, but I love this book and can't go without telling you about it. It's called The Rise of the Superman. And this is about, it goes right along with what we're talking about. It's based on extreme sports, whitewater kayakers, whitewater rafters, downhill skiers, mountain climbers, triathletes. And they talk about, it's called the, zone theory, about getting into the zone and focusing on yourself, focusing on within. And I think for a school leader, that is a great thing to have, knowing that as you continue to focus on yourself and focus inward, your natural responses become more heightened. So they talk about that, a rock climber who can do a free climb, up a mountain face. How is he able to know where the handholds are? It's because he's so hyper focused that he's gotten to a state of not thinking, that he is focused so deeply within that his senses are heightened. And it gets into neurology, and for student learning, I think it's important too, because it talks about the effects of dopamine. It talks about neuroreceptors and things like that. I always find kind of cool. But Absolutely, Rise of the Superman, check it out. It's on Amazon. Great book. I want to say it's on its second printing. It may be out of print, but there are copies absolutely still available. Check it out. It's a great book. So,
Good
well,
deal.
Dennis,
Sounds good.
hey, we finished up another one. I hope everybody at your house is healthy, wealthy, and wise, right?
You too, my friend. Yeah, we're good. We're, like I said, we're in for a few days, and we're just going to chill out here and stay healthy and safe and enjoy each other. And I hope that your family does the same, and I hope all our listeners do the same during this crazy time. I hope, we provided a good 45, 50 minutes here of them able to just sit back and relax and listen and soak some professional development in. Hopefully we're able to say something. I always say when I go to a professional development of any kind, any sessions, these trips, to Nashville, Knoxville, or, anywhere to some kind of professional development. Oftentimes we spend all day, several days there. I always tell myself, if I get one nugget, just one nugget a day, if I can get one thing that I can take back to my school, then it was worth my time.
Sure. That's
so
great.
hopefully, in our 30 to 45, 60-minute blogs. They're probably about the longest we ever do. We can provide one nugget, just one nugget for somebody. So if you're listening, you're out there and you got one nugget, let us know. Let us know what it was.
Absolutely. Hey, and I'm with you. I'm going to, not to plug our website and our blog site and our YouTube sites.
Oh,
but
please
guys,
do.
hey, I'm going to put all that in the comment section. Please check us out, but please reach out. Listen, we're not out here trying to make $1 million. Trust
No.
me, I'm not retiring anytime soon from, what we're doing. We're here to support each other. That's the whole reason Dennis and I are doing what we're doing. So we want to support you. I use the term of build your tribe. We are building a tribe right here for professional leaders, educational leaders. Reach out to us because I want to reach out to you. Dennis wants to talk to you. And the only way we can learn is by sharing with each other. So please give us a like, give us a subscribe, and reach out to us because that's the only way we're going to build this network.
Yeah, you can follow us. You follow us from the Principal's Desk. We're on Twitter. We're on Facebook. We've got our own Twitter handles that I'm sure you'll post below. Make sure you guys give us a follow and reach out to us and let us know that you're out there and you're listening.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Dennis, I've had so much fun talking to you, buddy. A little bit of break from the quarantine. So I hope you have a good week, brother. Everyone have a great week. Stay healthy, stay safe, and we'll catch you next time from the Principal's Desk. This is Sharp. Stay sharp out there.
Wild out.